All right, Michelle, welcome to the Look Good, Move Well podcast. This is our first guest on the show in quite a while. We don't have a lot of guests, so I'm so happy to have you here. We do something called FBB Banter. To start off the episode, so we don't just dive into the deep stuff. So this is your first trip to Marin County, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What is the coolest thing that you've experienced outside of obviously hanging out with all of us here?
Obviously.
What do you like about the county or the location so far?
Going over the Golden Gate Bridge was really cool. I did like that. Felt very iconic. But I really like how calm it is here. Like being by the water, everything's very peaceful. A lot of outdoor activities. People are very active here. So that's been cool to see. I've felt very relaxed here so far. So that's been nice.
Awesome, right? So that's a plug to everybody out there who hasn't visited Marin County yet. Come on out. We're in the San Francisco Bay Area. Come give us a shout over at FBB headquarters.
Pretty great.
Yeah. But I'm super excited that you took the trip out from across the country. We didn't know each other really prior to this. Aside from what, like a few DM exchanges and text messages.
Yep. And then like a FaceTime the day before.
Yeah, a FaceTime the night before, basically just to affirm that we're both not creeps. And we're like, hey, you're like a pretty cool person. Okay, this is going to go well. Or this could be a little tricky. And outside of me reaching out to you, what was your awareness about functional bodybuilding before that? Yeah,
I've been following your page for a long time, probably a couple years. And I knew of functional bodybuilding. I've just never like tapped into it in any sense, really bodybuilding in general. But I've seen kind of your growth, and then just like the movements and the information you put out has always been super helpful. So
sweet. So for the listeners, just can you give us the elevator pitch on your story, where are you at now in life, and what's the last decade look like? Yeah.
So I've competed in CrossFit for the last couple of years, made the games twice as an individual, which has been amazing. But I recently burnt out twice now. Second time was this year. So I took a break from competing, and I really stepped into kind of a new way of training and just approaching fitness in general, which has been bodybuilding, which has been very cool. So I've taken this year to step back and really reset, heal my hormones, heal my gut a little bit, slow down in the gym just to lower my stress. And that's where the bodybuilding has come into play, which is also developed into a new way of training for me, which has been very cool. So that's kind of been the last almost year, 6 months or so.
Yeah. I think an interesting thing to kind of dive a little bit deeper into is the concept or the terminology around burnout. Yeah. What does it actually feel like as an athlete to burn out? Because you said, I hit burnout twice. What is that like?
Yeah, the first time it happened, I don't think I was like aware of what was happening. So for me, it felt very much like not wanting to work out, not wanting to even go to the gym in general. And it's like a very big difference of, you have your training, you don't really feel like doing it that day. This feels mentally heavy. It almost borderlines maybe a little bit of depression. Like it's just so much harder to do average day things like make breakfast or get out of bed or enjoy time with friends or family. And it really slowed me down in a lot of ways. And I was just very unhappy. And so with all of that, it was much harder to make training happen. Like it was just felt more like a task, and it felt like work than something that I enjoyed. So it kind of created this unhealthy relationship with the gym. And the other part of that, like I said, is just like your day to day where I have no energy to do anything else. I think at some point in season, you do kind of get to that, like especially maybe from semis to games, you're really locked in. But mine was just going over months at a time of just not wanting to really do anything. And again, just not really stepping in the gym. I still would. I'd go to the gym and work out, but just very unhappy while I was doing it. And it felt way heavier than it should have.
And that was like a big shift for you. Cause like, you've shared with me a little bit about your history of training, but when did you got started training in your, like as a teenager, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I started CrossFit when I was about 16, 17, I just wanted to stay in shape. Like I really wanted abs. Like that was like the big thing. Wanted to work out, and, that led into a bit of Olympic lifting when I was 18, 19, 20. And then about 19, 20, I was like, okay, I want to compete in CrossFit, and, you know, said I want to make the games. So that was the goal, and just buckled into that for 4 years. And then at 24, I made the games, which was great. But I really put a lot of effort and time and dedication into that over the years. So it was great. I did it, you know, but it's very, all consuming.
It's a huge accomplishment. And you're right. It's a massive amount of dedication and commitment to it. Mm-hmm. And to arrive at the end of what were like these multiple huge accomplishments of making, you know, the world championships in a sport that a lot of people try to compete in. Mm-hmm. And you were successful at that, to feel like at the end of it, I feel terrible.
Yeah.
I don't want to do the thing that's been a staple in my life for the last decade.
Yes.
You know, I don't even want to go and train.
Yeah.
And where does that put you in like a mental, emotional state? Like, what is that like?
Yeah. It was mentally very hard to step away from competing, or even just not enjoy it anymore. But when I got to the point where I didn't even enjoy the gym and I didn't want to work out at all, that was very scary to me, because I do want longevity out of this. Like I love the idea of being able to move when I'm 80 and keep myself as healthy as possible. And so when I couldn't get myself to just do the absolute minimum of maybe like going on a walk, that was like very eye-opening. And I was like, okay, something's got to change here. And I basically just wanted to like find a minimum, like at the very least, what can I do? And that was, you know, starting with a walk or a little bit of movement. And I had to just kind of restart from the beginning and build back up into feeling good about stepping back into the gym and working out again.
So much of my story, I've shared it enough on this podcast, but like, you know, 2016 CrossFit Games. After that season, I also played a season of Grid, which was a sport that kind of not many people heard about at this day and age in CrossFit, but it was sort of like a spin-off CrossFit thing. So it's like games, and then I got a month rest, and then I was feeling what you're feeling, but then I was asked to go out and compete for like 8 weeks in this grueling thing too. Mm-hmm. So I got buried pretty deep too into like a deficit. And I recall the same exact feelings of like, this was before we had kids, but I was married to Megan and we had a baby on the way, and I'm trying to rebuild my business. And I recall telling her, I was like, I just don't even want to go work out. Like, I don't want to train.
Yeah.
And like training is my connection to my career, my job. And it was super scary for me.
Yeah.
The other part though, that maybe it's like not talked about, you know, you already mentioned it, you know, fitness for you is a lot of things, but one part of it is looking a particular way. Like I train because I want to look and feel, I want to feel good, but I also want to look good.
Yes.
So when you go from training at a high level, many hours a week, now I don't feel good. I don't want to even train at all. How does that impact you psychologically? Where like, was there a thought like, oh shoot, like I'm going to lose this physique and this look and this like athletic body that I've worked so hard for. I'm afraid that I'm going to turn into mush.
Yeah, no, for sure. I definitely deal with a bit of that. I do like looking nice, and I like muscle, and I like taking care of my body, but stepping away from competing, I definitely felt like I'm going to lose all this. I'm going to lose my skills, but I'm going to lose my body composition. But I do know that nutrition plays a big role. And so I was pretty good about keeping that in check. And even with doing very minimum, I did keep my diet in check. And so I think that kept my body comp pretty steady over the last couple of years, just in between burnouts. Earlier this year, I was probably up almost like 10, 12 pounds, and had really bad gut issues, had really bad skin issues. This was like early January 2024. And so that kind of, again, kicked it into gear for me of like making changes and figuring out what to do to fix all of that. So it was very surprising that pulling back from training and working out 5 days a week was a fix, was what was actually going to help it, to allow my body to, you know, lower stress, lower cortisol, like come out of that fight or flight, let my nervous system relax, because it's not what I was kind of used to or trained to do the last couple years, you know?
Yeah. Just to make this relatable to the audience too, because there's a lot of examples of people pushing their stress or pushing their bodies and just their lifestyle really hard in overdrive. And that could be from being very physically active and doing too much in the gym, or doing too much in a sport, or not too much in a sport, but just competing in a demanding sport. But for a lot of people, it's pushing themselves really hard in their career, maybe having young kids, babies, newborns, not sleeping. Maybe it's over, substance abuse, or drinking more, or getting into a place in their life where they're not satisfied with their career, and then they're using other outlets that are not really like nurturing their bodies. They're kind of wearing them down. And what I see a lot is people that get injured, hurt, or something takes them out of their training. Or they can't do what they've been doing. And there's this huge panic and fear that comes over them, like, oh my gosh, like I can't train 5 days a week anymore. I can't do any upper body. I get a common DM. It's like, hey Marcus, like I hurt my knee, like I can't squat. What can I do so that my legs don't turn into like sticks, right? And so here's an example. It's like you went from doing all of this to doing just this little amount, or this, relative little amount. And can you speak to like the less is more concept a little bit? Yeah,
that's probably been one of the most eye-opening things, is I don't have to do all of this intensity or all of this volume to stay healthy or stay in a good body composition. And it took a while for me to mentally wrap my head around that. Even the coach that I was working with, who was more bodybuilding based, he had to repeatedly tell me, like, you're going to be fine. Like, you're still going to keep muscle. Like, I would text him freaking out about it. I just had to be patient with the process of it and let it kind of play into fruition, and still get consistent with 3 days of training. So he pulled me back to 3 days of training a week, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. Like, I'm not going to get enough out of that. Walking 4 days a week. And even through these last couple months, I was barely consistent with those 3 days, So it was just like getting that minimum down, and then trusting that the strength training I was doing was going to be enough. And it has been. I still can lift really well, decent weight, but I'm really impressed with the body composition that I've built out just with the little that I have done. But it's taken me a mental switch to trust it versus, lean into what I know, which is, hardcore CrossFit training. And I see a lot of this in, college athletes that come out of, doing a collegiate sport for so long, and then they finish college and they're like, I didn't know what to do after that. And so I just stopped going to the gym, or I just stopped working out. And so it's hard to make that switch and trust something else or enjoy something else. But I'm seeing now that you have options, like functional bodybuilding, which is amazing. And then even for me, mixing it up and doing something new. I did a lot of hot yoga. I tried Pilates, didn't love it. It was great. But, bodybuilding was new for me. So opening up my mindset to allow, new things in and try them out was hard, but I've seen the benefits of it. So,
yeah, I want to stick with this, because you're right. I've known this for, I'm almost 20 years since I graduated from college, just about. So I competed in collegiate athletics. I was a D1 soccer player, and I got to see a lot of, those folks that I trained with at the same time. I've bumped into them years later, and, some of my teammates, many of my teammates that I've seen, they didn't transition into some other movement practice or some other sport, and they didn't find a new way to engage with fitness. I hear a lot of them will say, gosh, if I could only just play soccer more or get back on the field. Like I always love that. I love sports. I don't love working out. And, to me, it's like your sport was working out, CrossFit. But, if you're an athlete and you're making a transition to like, look, movement and being active gave you something. The sport also gave you something in and of itself.
Yes.
How do you make that transition to continuing to develop a good relationship with movement and training so that you can have all those benefits that you had? And maybe you're not going to get the competitive itch scratched. Maybe you have to find that some other place in life. But it's just not accessible to most people who are out of college. It's like, you're not going to, they're not going to be a competitive soccer, volleyball. You're not going pro. Like it might be over.
Yeah.
What's a bit of advice or something that you've learned in this process of like, okay, it's almost a year since you had your last games, right? Because the games are coming up next month. Probably a little down period afterwards where we're just, what am I going to do? What am I going to figure out? And then now you're like, okay, I'm going to try something new. I'm going to try this bodybuilding thing. I'm going to try a different style of training. I'm sure it didn't click right away.
No.
What's the process look like? And how would you advise somebody on how to make that move?
I think finding something that you enjoy doing is very important, but being open to new things is very important. And as I'm getting older and growing, like even if I were to, play soccer in college now at this age, or as I get older, like soccer isn't going to produce the results I want, right? So I have to dabble in things that get me to the goal that I want to do or be, which for me right now is just staying healthy, staying in shape, staying in the gym. So I would say be open to things and try new things. And if it's something that kind of scares you a little bit or puts you outside your comfort zone, that's probably a good sign that it's something you should do, Even going to a Gold's Gym, the first couple times I went, I was so uncomfortable, like felt so awkward, which is silly because I've been in the gym space for so long, but it was a new thing to me. And so now I feel good with it, but it took a couple months, and just, you have to be patient with it. Definitely patience with it.
Yeah. There's a bit of patience to find what works for you, but then there's an acknowledgement that, hey, you know what? I want to be this healthy, fit person, and what you worked in the past, like maybe that season of life is over, and I'm going to have to be open to a new outlet. I have to actively seek it, and it's not going to feel right on day one.
No.
It's not going to feel like competing and doing the sport you love for a bunch of years.
Right.
It's going to feel different.
Yes. Yeah. And just learning, habits. I mean, CrossFit's taught me how to track food, so I have good portion control. It's taught me how to eat clean, move right in the gym. I like prioritizing time to get my heart rate up, and now walking is something I love implementing. So just take things as like tools and habits to make your day better or make you better versus like a task that you have to do. I think a lot of people stress the gym, or it's like, I don't want to go or I have to go. It's like, how do you flip that into, well, what's enjoyable about it? Like, it's going to make me better. Like that end result, is kind of what I look forward to or what I think about versus, I have to go do this.
Sure. And, maybe one more thought on this is that, in your CrossFit Games competitive career and mine and my soccer career and, through competitive sports, like, and anybody listening who had that, like, how many days did you wake up feeling like, God, I don't want to fucking go to practice. Like, this is going to be hard, and, but you love that sport. You probably look back fondly on it. You look back and remember like all the great things that came from it, but not every day you woke up and you were stoked to go to run, sprints or do, sprints at hockey practice or whatever it was. Sometimes it's challenging, but the payoff is, there. And so take that with you too. It's like,
100%.
You're not going to be stoked on the gym every single day. You're not going to be stoked on your fitness and your nutrition plan every day, but it's that consistency in doing it for a long time. All right. I want to talk about this concept and these kind of buzzwords of hormones and gut health.
Yes.
Because you mentioned it and a lot of people like to talk about it. When did that even become like part of your awareness?
Let's see. I think so I made the games in 2021. End of that year into 2022 is when burnout really started to kick in, and I missed the games for 2022 and was just in probably the lowest point for me as far as burnout goes. And again, terrible skin flare up, a lot of inflammation. My weight was very high. And so I found a coach who works in kind of like functional medicine and gut and hormone health. And so I started working with him, and just with, we didn't even do any testing at that point. He just changed my diet a little bit, and we worked with some supplements, but pulled back from the gym, and that made a big change. And then I wasn't fully committed to stepping away from CrossFit at that point. So I was still lightly CrossFit training when I worked with him. And then I got back into season, competed 2023, and then fell out again back into this burnout type of situation. And again, earlier this year when I started to have these like skin flare-ups and my body weight was up and I was very, very stressed, I reached back out to him and I was like, I'm a mess. Like how can I get this back on track? And so this time we did some testing. We did a gut test and we did a hormone panel just to see where I was at. Which I think the testing is very good because then you actually know what you're working with, right? Versus just taking a supplement and hoping that that's going to fix the situation. I liked knowing exactly what was going on. And so he pulled me back training wise or exercise wise, and that allowed my cortisol to come down. I putting in walking each day and like not waking up and being like, hey, you know, typically training, I would wake up and it's like, all right, how do I get myself to the gym? What do I need to do in the gym today? Like, that's probably my first thought is like training, how to get it done. My brain goes right to there. So, waking up and just being like, oh, I can just go on a walk. Like, that's all. Like that was, it took a couple of weeks, but that started to become very like, okay, like I can de-stress a little bit. I just have to walk today. Like there's no other pressure to do anything else. And that through that, it allowed me to wake up and like be calm and de-stress a little bit. And I think stacking that over the last couple of months has helped a lot. And then the gut stuff, I'm doing a supplement protocol with it, which is good. And I think it'll help, but truly it's just been clean eating, lowering my stress for sure. And then focusing on sleep, like getting a lot of good sleep, I think has made the biggest difference, in my skin and then my body composition. So it's still new to me, but I'm understanding that those things play a big role. And I think, again, female hormones to male hormones are very different. And CrossFit training for female and male is very similar. So I do see that there's some room there to maybe approach training differently as a female. But it's a learning process for me. If anything, I'm seeing that I have options on how to to stay healthy.
Yeah, I mean, the themes that we talk about here, we've talked a lot about on the podcast are, you know, as it comes to like gut health and stress. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday. But gut health, stress, and hormones is that, you know, your body, like the way our body functions physiologically, there's lots of different systems going on. You know, hormones are kind of this master sort of conductor of a lot of different things. Your nervous system is a master conductor. And your gut is kind of like a very vital organ system because there's tons of surface area and there's like a lot of tissue, you know, your small intestine, your stomach, your large intestine, your colon, very, very expansive and also very sensitive tissue where this is a very sensitive, you know, thin line of cells that when they're exposed to lots of stress, poor food, highly processed food, lots of sugars, lots of anti-inflammatories, which I don't know if that was in your life, but I know a lot of CrossFitters just popping anti-inflammatories all the time because you're constantly hurt, getting poor sleep, alcohol, which isn't a big thing for athletes, but it's a big thing for people in general. In general. All these things can damage downstream your gut, but big picture is, you know, proper function of our bodies happens when we have the right amount of stress input and the right amount of time to recover and adapt from that stress. And if so it's kind of like this two-way street. We talk about stress buckets. You have a bucket that is your total capacity to handle stress. You pour water in, that's how much stress is in your life. You're adding to it. That's fitness, that's nutrition, that's alcohol, that's relationships. And then at the bottom, you got a release valve.
Yeah.
And, you can open your release valve, but it can only empty out at a fixed rate. If you have better sleep, it might empty out a little faster. If you have clean diet, it might empty out faster, right? So you're handling these two inputs and outputs. When you're in a stressful environment, you piling on so much on the outside, the things that get impacted when your stress bucket is full is your body's production of hormones gets disrupted.
Yeah.
Because it starts to prioritize making a stress hormone called cortisol, not making sex hormones like estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, not worrying about more growth hormone and those things that are good healing and good for energy, libido, muscle mass, all kinds of restfulness, etc. Same thing with your gut.
Yeah.
Your gut is getting damaged every day. Everyone's gut's getting damaged every day.
Yeah.
But most people, they go to bed, they get a good night's sleep, they get a little growth hormone surge, their gut heals. It's just this constant breakdown, healing. But when the stress is super high, guess what? Your body's like, I got to stay alive. I don't have energy to go and fix my gut right now.
Yeah.
I'm just going to try and stay alive.
Right.
And the hormones in the gut go kind of to shit. They kind of go down the tank when the stress is really high. So you have options, right? Well, the stress is high and I can't stop the stress.
No.
So I got to go and get more supplements to fix these, patch up these holes that are in my game.
Yeah.
That was me in 2014 when I was like still on the competition rise, and I was like, I'm not going to stop. So I'm taking adrenal health supplements. I'm taking gut health, powders every day. I'm doing all the things that I can do to try and, patch this like vessel that is flying at 1,000,000 miles an hour and is kind of falling apart.
Right.
On the flip side, outside of the sport, you could bypass the supplements and you can just turn the volume down on how much stress is going into the bucket.
Yes.
Which is going to 3 days a week of training.
Right.
Which is switching from something like high intensity lactic acid based CrossFit Metcons daily to bodybuilding. And adding in more walking as opposed to high intensity cardio, to adjusting your food profile to higher quality foods, probably with better portion control. So you're getting yourself into energy balance more so than energy surplus, and sunshine, sleep, the things that we've talked about.
Yeah. Yeah. Mindful rest, like all of those things. It was hard for me to mentally accept that was going to be a fix or just it was going to help me. It didn't seem like that was the answer at the time.
Right.
It was, for me, I just thought of training, eating to train, sleeping to support training, and that was kind of it. So to switch over and open up to new concepts that are going to help me heal was very tricky and took a lot of time. Yeah. But I 100% believe in it now, but I just didn't, I wish I implemented some of this stuff in my season or knew how to. I think my training would have looked a lot different, but yeah.
Well, we have a couple more minutes, and I guess I want to maybe just touch on the experience that you've had since you've been here. So you've been doing a form of bodybuilding or adding more slow, controlled movements, machine-based training, less CrossFit style intensity into your life for a period of time. Came here, we did some bodybuilding, we did some functional bodybuilding here. Yeah. What were what were one or two big takeaways that you got that you feel like you'll take back into your training next week when you're going through your program or heading into the gym? Yeah,
I definitely am not training as hard or as much as I could, in the sense of, for instance, we did pull-ups today and you assisted me on some of those last reps and I went way longer than I thought I was going to, or kind of pushing till failure with lighter weight. I think I've just been rolling through the bodybuilding movements a little bit. I've played around with weight a little bit as far as machines go or things like that, but I see that there's way more room for me to push not at this intense level, but I guess a strength training point of view, which is really cool. So I'm excited to take that into training moving forward. And then there's one other thing. I'm going to blank on it.
No, it's if it comes to you, great. If okay. It doesn't, no problem.
Yeah. That was definitely it. Oh, the like slowing movements down, right? Mm-hmm. So bench, for instance, I mean, I'm just used to like knocking out reps. If I have 3 by 15, I hit my 15 and I move on. Yeah. We did some slow, controlled, full range of motion reps yesterday, and I feel like I got so much more out of that. Mm-hmm. So being more intentional with my movements, I'm looking forward to, and just focusing on like more of a mind to muscle connection versus just speeding through and knocking it out. Yeah, those are two. And doing a negative on the last rep.
Doing a negative on the last rep. No dropping from the top.
Yes.
I love those takeaways. Those are beautiful. And another way to put language to it is, you know, intensity in bodybuilding and intensity in CrossFit look different. In CrossFit, it's about power production, doing more work in less time.
Yeah.
In bodybuilding, it's about not necessarily doing more work in less time, but it's putting tension in the right places and taking yourself close to, if not to failure on those movements. So that is how you're going to learn how to express intensity. And that's a skill. Just like in CrossFit, you had to learn how to push yourself on burpees and pull-ups to go as hard and as fast as you could.
Right.
You need to do the same thing here. And, you know, Megan shared it with you. She says it regularly, but 2 years of training in this environment, doing this stuff with us, with me, with Nate, that's the biggest thing that she's learned, is how to actually push hard in training.
Yes.
And that's where the results are. And that's where this style of training can really transform people's, you know, strength, health, physique, etc. And then the part about, you know, range of motion and controlling reps. Mm-hmm. This is another way of talking about technique. Yeah. So in CrossFit, you do a lot of technical movements, and there's no question that you talk about technique and snatch and cleans and jerks and really everything, because you're trying to optimize efficiency.
Yes.
The technique in bodybuilding is, how do I move this weight through the biggest range of motion possible and put the most amount of tension on the muscles that I'm actually training.
Right.
And that doesn't always look like the heaviest weight, and it doesn't look like fast reps, and it sometimes looks like half an inch adjustment of your elbow.
Yes.
And so take those with you, and any listeners. Yeah. There is such a thing as bodybuilding intensity, and it's not how, you know, loud you're grunting. It is how close you are pushing your effort to failure.
Yes.
With good technique. And that technique in bodybuilding is I have found it to be as hard, if not harder, than, you know, learning a precision snatch in ways.
Yes.
So I'm not here to argue whether snatching or you know, doing lat pull downs is more difficult. I will leave that to the trolls out there on the internet.
There we go.
But again, I want to thank you so much for taking the trip out to California took a risk to come meet us. And I know this is not the last time we're going to see you. It was such a pleasure to host you, and thank you very much.
Thank you guys. Your team's amazing, and I've had so much fun, and I'm so excited to just do more of it. So appreciate you guys.
Awesome. Thank you.